Hello, and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back. This week, we are talking all about things we wish we knew as sleep coaches when we are first-time parents. And by we, I have my colleague, Rachael of Hey Sleepy Baby here to chat and reflect and to share right along with me. So Rachael, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's funny when I saw your podcast come out and your I guess it was a trailer around your podcast coming out just a few weeks after mine came out. And I was like, oh my God, first, I love the premise. And second, we should have a conversation about this. And that's actually when the idea popped into my head. And I was like, neither of us were sleep coaches, knew much about sleep with our oldest.
Right.
And then both ended up, really coming to the same values and the same sort of ethos of working with parents and doing things differently or just understanding, supporting ourselves differently as moms with other kiddos in the future. So
I think so many of us in the sleep world come to this work because of our experiences with our first baby, right? It's like, it's
yes.
rare that you see one of us, like a sleep coach or a sleep consultant that doesn't have kids or that didn't have a tricky sleeper at one point. So yeah, we totally get the struggle because we went through it ourselves mostly.
Absolutely. And that brought us into sleep, right? As an interest, usually personally first, and then that morphing into professionally.
Yep.
So before we jump in, share a little bit about yourself, and maybe we could just lead right into your experience. Then I'll share a little bit about my experience with my oldest after that.
Sure. So I'm Rachael. So for anyone who doesn't know me or my page, I started the page called Hey Sleepy Baby on Instagram in 2020, March. And so that was
right as the world is shutting down.
Quite a time. I had a 5-week-old baby, and I kind of just started the page as I was going through my first sleep certification because I thought that it would be like a fun maternity leave project. And that I'd have like so much time. And totally. And then the world shut down. So then I had my toddler at home with me too, because his daycare closed, of course. And so, I kind of just like white knuckled it for the first little bit there. But, eventually got my first sleep certification done and then did a bunch of other certifications and trainings. And the page just kind of continued to grow and grow. And now I have 3 kids and still doing Hey Sleepy Baby content. I have a team now. We work with families all over the world. And it's just been quite a wild ride that all really started, like you said, with me just really like researching the heck out of different sleep options when I was pregnant with my second, because our first experience with sleep with my oldest, who is now 6, was so traumatic and hard. And I was desperately trying to find another way. And that kind of opened up my world to like this other approach of, I had heard of things like attachment parenting and things like that, but that always felt a little bit extreme to me too. So it's like, I just didn't realize that there were like other options in between of the extremes, right? Of like cry it out or sleep training and like full blown attachment parenting. Like there's so much in between that people don't really realize. So anyway, I found a couple of Instagram pages, found the first sleep certification that I did and signed up and did it during COVID.
Wild times. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I remember the first like actual legit, not just like attachment parenting, but like more practical
Right.
sleep accounts I found with my oldest. And I remember just being like, oh my God, like, wow. Because I talk about this pretty often. I learned I didn't do anything to prepare about sleep when I was pregnant with my oldest. It was all like, huge comprehensive birth class, and like
Exactly.
I have a MPH in maternal and child public health, and like during one of my internships, I got to observe some lactation consults and
Mhm.
lactation like prenatal classes. And so I was like, I don't need to take a lactation class. I grabbed the Later League book and I'm good, because I've already been exposed to like a class. I've taken a class essentially, even though I wasn't pregnant at the time. But like sleep wasn't even, it just wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I was just like, oh, whatever. They wake and they need to be fed and they go back to sleep. And
Yep.
my mom raised us with these lovely stories about my sister and I were bad sleepers. She didn't say it that way, but we were bad sleepers. My sister probably had reflux, like now with that lens. She woke like every 45 minutes for the first year. And
Yeah.
I didn't sleep through the night till I was 3. And my mom has this very distinct memory of the first time I slept through the night, because her and my dad got food poisoning. I passed out on the couch and didn't
Oh
come find her.
no. Oh my God.
So she was like, of course. I mean, it was good timing because they were really sick.
I was gonna say you gave them a break. That was so nice of you.
Yeah, but it was very memorable because of that, like being very
That's so
specifically
funny.
grounded. So I was like, I have great expectations around sleep. I'm good, totally don't need to learn about that. And then, of course, I'm sure you can imagine the other
Mhm.
side of being pregnant with a baby and just being like, what the actual heck is going on here? Like,
Yeah, it comes
being
as
so
quite a
clueless.
shock. It comes as quite a shock. I think you hear all about like things that could happen at birth. And so you prepare for that. You hear about things that might happen with breastfeeding. And so you prepare for that. And then I don't know, it seems like sleep is just like people know, right? Because people will say to you when you're pregnant, like, oh, you're never going to sleep again, or like, oh, get ready for, to be exhausted all the time. Like, that you're going to be tired or that babies wake up, I guess. But I think people are prepared for it up until a certain point, right? So like I
Mm-hmm.
was totally prepared for it for the first couple months. I was like, we're going to be tired, we're going to be exhausted, the baby's going to be up all the time. We're going to need to, nap and help each other and things like that. We were totally prepared and like yes, it was harder than I thought it would be to be exhausted and to be up feeding a baby, especially because my first was so unsettled and tongue tied and reflux and all that stuff. So
Oh,
it was
yeah.
harder than I was imagining it to be, but I also thought it would end a lot sooner than it did. I thought it was going to be like a rough first couple months and then he would start to sleep. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's what was reflected back to me in my world too. Like people were asking me, once he was a few months old, oh, so is he sleeping through the night yet? And I'd be like, no, like not even close. And so that made me feel like he should be and that there was something wrong with him if he wasn't. So I think that for me was kind of the shock. It's like I wasn't shocked that he was a wakeful newborn and that I was an exhausted new mom. I was shocked that it was continuing beyond those
Yeah.
initial weeks.
Yeah. The thing that really shocked me was that things got worse around 4 months. Like I had
Oh,
never
for
been
sure.
exposed to the 4 month sleep regression.
No, me either.
I went back to work at about 15 weeks
Mm-hmm.
postpartum,
Same.
and we
Mm-hmm.
had a very stressful first 6 months based on how my oldest birth went, and also my husband was working in this really toxic work environment and it was creating a lot of mental health issues. So we had like a lot of other stuff going on, right? Like birth trauma I didn't have the space to process because my husband was having an anxiety crisis, and I know he doesn't mind me sharing that. So like he had a lot on our plate, and like so kind of like you, I'm like, oh, newborns wake, no big deal, whatever. And then 3 months, like he was still waking, but he was giving me a solid first stretch. And
Mm-hmm.
he was and still is a night owl kiddo. And I am an early to bed kiddo. So we actually went to bed at the same time. And that was really easy for me
Mm-hmm.
because I want to go to bed. Like my body likes to go to bed at 9:30.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah.
And that's when his body wanted to go to bed. So it was like really perfect in that sense. And then I was back to work a couple weeks, right? And then he started waking up all the freaking time. And he wouldn't go back in his like bassinet, or I guess it was his travel crib at that point, whatever. He was a big baby. He wouldn't transfer. And I was just like, I'm going to lose my ever loving mind. Like I
Yep.
can't function. And it's a slow time at work. Like it's not even like it's a busy time at work. I literally can't like trust myself get on the metro and go from Capitol Hill to Rockville, which was where I was working, and being a human and even as remotely competent. And that's what really caught me off guard and was kind of my, what the heck am I supposed to do? I don't understand. Is this even a normal thing?
Right.
And that paired with all the like sleep training pressure, it was like, I know I didn't want to do it. It didn't sound right. It really caught me off guard. I wasn't like aware of it as a thing. It didn't click that people did things like cried out. So I was like, what are you people talking about? But also I'm really tired and I don't even understand what I'm supposed to be doing and what's normal. Right. And so that's what sort of started my research insanity into all things sleep, was this really lovely lactation consultant. I had the world's best pediatrician, and she knew what she didn't know. And I also had a bottle refuser. I know. I still get clients, local clients who have her because we switched insurance when my son was 2 and she was a Kaiser pediatrician. And I still have clients who have her and I'm like, I'm jealous. That's amazing. I love her. But my kiddo was also not taking a bottle. Like he was bottle refusing. And so she was like, let's grab a lactation consultant, grabbed her in. And that lactation consultant is the one that like originally showed me my first really good resources. And it's kind of wild to think like, would I have found them if she hadn't,
right. I know. It's like those people that you interact with in the first few months or weeks as a parent, like sometimes they don't even realize how much they can change the trajectory of your journey and your parenting. And yeah, that's so wonderful.
Yeah. So those are like my things, right? As a new parent, I had no idea what was normal. Like, and I had no idea that people were sleep training. And so that was like super shocking. And then I didn't realize that sleep could get worse.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like my big, like, oh my God, I was not even remotely prepared for. And I think how vulnerable you are, right? The fact that like small comments can really be amplified.
Yeah. It's such a sensitive time. It really is. And that was what kind of made me spiral too, is the constant questions about how he was sleeping and people like pitying me. And it made me just feel like, oh my God, like, is this really that bad? Is this really that abnormal? Like, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with him? And it makes you question everything. So yeah, that was really tough for me.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, well, not funny. It's interesting. I have a cultural anthropology background. So like my saving grace in the first year was bed sharing, right, with my oldest. And it's funny because that wasn't actually a new concept to me, right? Like I had a pretty good grounding in a cross-cultural lens. I knew people bed shared. I mean, my mom bed shared with me and I knew that. And I literally remember this conversation with my mom where I was like, Mom, the guidelines have changed. He's going to sleep in his bassinet because I was working on a grant program that dealt with infant mortality at the time. So it was super AAP, right?
Yeah, right.
And so it was kind of funny. And my mom is amazing and didn't like rub it in my face because she totally could have, right? When we ended up bed sharing. And that was a big piece of getting us over the initial, like, I can't function, so that I could actually start to understand, like, there are sleep patterns, there are things you can look for. And, that kind of those pieces with my own kiddo.
Right. Yeah. For me, bed sharing didn't even cross my mind as an option. Like I just never even considered having him in bed with me. Like there would be times where I'd be doing that, like, 4 or 5 a.m. feeding and he'd fall asleep with me in the bed.
Yeah.
Or I'd fall asleep with him on a chair while I was nursing in the middle of the night, and like doing so many things that were so much more unsafe now looking back, because I was so adamant to put him back in the bassinet or to make sure that he was, in his own space or independent or whatever. And like it truly, when I say it never even crossed my mind to bed share, I mean, it was just not even anywhere near my world to think about as an option. And so once I started learning more about it with my second, it changed everything. And I ended up bed sharing with her, like you said, because she around 4 months started to just go off the rails and would not transfer down. And I started bed sharing with her at that point. And she was in our bed until she was about 2. And that worked. I was so much less exhausted. Like she actually woke up more than my son did looking back. And I was so much more rested because I had been bed sharing. Like I never felt that deep exhaustion. Not never, she would have rough nights where she'd be teething or whatever else. But overall, like I didn't feel that huge exhaustion fog that I felt with my first. So yeah, it really did save me too. And I'm bed sharing with my youngest right now too.
How
And
old is
she's
your
actually
youngest?
like, she just turned 1, and it's funny because like she's actually my worst sleeper of the 3. Like she never has transferred to the bassinet.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my other kids as newborns were actually pretty good. Like they would lay down in their bassinets in between feedings as newborns and pretty much sleep in the bassinet until that 4-month mark. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she never would go in. Like from the time we brought her home from the first night, I was like, okay, well, this is not going to be your journey then.
Here we go.
Yeah. And even now, like I've tried a floor bed with her, and I try to put her down in there at night, and she has a false start every single night. I've tried all of our little tricks, and tried all of the different scheduling things I can think of. And I'm like about to hire somebody on my team, or just like tell one of my consultants, like, can you just look at this for me? Because sometimes when you're in it and you're the parent instead of the consultant, it's so hard to see those patterns the same way you would for a client. Because she's throwing me for a loop right now. But it's funny because they tell you like, oh, if you have a hard first one, your next one will be so easy. And for me, it's like they've gotten progressively harder as far as sleep goes. It's funny, but
I am so glad you shared that, because I know that I sometimes feel like there's a bit of evaluation of like we should have perfect sleepers because we are sleep coaches.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes to show how every kid is different and there's so much that's out of our control. And also, when you're in the middle of it, you are not the objective person.
No, exactly. And I think, sometimes I feel insecure about it because like I have gotten mean messages on Instagram before that are like, why would we take your advice when you're talking about how you're struggling with your sleep or with your kids' sleep? Like you can't even get your own kids' sleep under control. Like why should you be giving advice? I know.
And it's so like, well,
I know, but it's like, it's true. You can't control another human, or you can only control so much. And it's like, well, does your doctor not still get sick sometimes? Like, I don't know. You can't, I mean, sometimes you just can't know everything or fix everything. Right. So yeah, it's funny, but I also feel like it makes people feel a lot better. And overall people are able to look at me and what I share about my personal journey with sleep and my kids and stuff. And they're like, okay, well, if she has tough nights, it's okay if I have tough nights sometimes too. I think it overall makes people feel a lot less alone and a lot less like crazy, or like they're the only ones whose kids don't sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah. My daughter was born, and I remember, I don't know, she must have been 3 weeks old, 4 weeks old, somewhere in there. And I was like texting my good friend who's a lactation consultant, like something about her eating patterns and her pooping patterns and whatever. And like, I've been doing lactation support, at least as a peer supporter, since 2014. Like I know my lactation stuff. It's not that I didn't know it, but I needed her to ask me the questions and talk to me and just be able to text her. And not necessarily have to have a big lactation consult, because she was latching, she was transferring, she was fine. But she wasn't pooping as often as she should have been. And, just like I needed to debrief it with somebody, because
for sure. I mean, a doctor still sees another doctor, a therapist still gets therapy from somebody else. They don't therapize themselves. So I think it's good and healthy. Like I have a group chat on Instagram with other sleep professionals and, great people, and we bounce stuff off each other all the time. It's nice to have like a community of different, because everybody has a slightly different background and different experiences and different work with clients and all of that. So I think that's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. But going back to like your kids getting harder, with sleep. It's funny because like my second was my easier sleeper, my daughter, in some ways, but it actually took her longer as a toddler to sleep through than it did my son. And both of them weren't early sleeper throughers by any means, but it was fine. We bed shared, they woke, like they nursed. It was fine. But I remember like looking at my husband at one point being like, she was such an easier sleeper as a baby. And like as a like over 2-year-old toddler, she was actually more disruptive to my sleep than she was in her first 2 years. And some of that was she hit right before her second birthday. And so It's possible that her brother being home and her trying really hard to drop her nap before she was ready to drop her nap and all that shaped that. But it's just so interesting how like she was a pretty average amount. If you like look at the studies, I feel like they were written about her. She was pretty average waker.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it flipped. I'm like, wait, what happened to my easier sleeper? And
I know.
it's
It's funny because people don't realize that like things can change and your baby could be super unsettled and hard as a baby. And it doesn't mean that they won't be a good sleeper as a child and vice versa. And, even babies who are sleep trained as infants, like their parents then have to buy a toddler course later because like they stop sleeping and there's all these new things that pop up in toddlerhood and in childhood. So yeah, sleep training doesn't make you immune to any of those things either, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of parents aren't aware of.
Yeah,
That it's not like grit your teeth, get through it, and you're going to have good sleep forever. It's like,
exactly.
it's not really how it works.
Nope.
Yeah. So for me, I feel like with my daughter, we just skipped so many things we didn't try with our oldest. And it's funny now looking back because she's the baby that I probably could have gotten to sleep more independently, but we didn't even try. I was like, I don't like, why would I bother? Like,
I know it's like the path of least resistance. Once you realize what's easiest and what's going to get everybody the most sleep, it's hard to do anything else.
exactly. And it's like,
Yeah.
like just being aware of typical rhythms and having already kind of embraced bed sharing and it's like I'm not even gonna try to put you in your bassinet. Like I don't want to waste the energy. Like and I didn't really want to. I mean, honestly, I didn't want to. And that was the driving factor. Like I didn't want to put her down for naps. I didn't want to put her in her bassinet. I wanted to snuggle her. And I think that confidence and just being like, at that point, I was a sleep coach and I was like, I don't care what people think. I am going to soak up all my snuggles.
That's what I've done with my third too. And yeah. And some people are like, well, it must be nice. Like, I wish I could do that, but I have stuff to do. And, it's not to say that it's for everybody or that you don't ever want some time alone or want, to have a break or to have your baby sleep independently. Like, of course, I've had those thoughts too. But overall, like, we know that this is our last baby and like 99% of the time I love it. So I'm just going to do it. And I know that it doesn't last forever.
Exactly. I remember easing back into work when my daughter was 3 months. And like taking a call and being like, I have a 2-month-old on my chest. So if you hear her. And I mean, it was like a, a free like intro kind of connection kind of call. It wasn't like a client call, but I was just like, yep, I can connect with you now. I'm like, I got a second baby on me. I'm coming back in from maternity leave. So, and like most people were like, cool, that's so cool. Yes, like awesome. You're right there in the thick of it with us and didn't
exactly.
mind at all.
I know that's what's so great about working like with other mostly moms is that they get it.
Yeah. How do you feel like, if you could tell yourself, your self with your first now, what would you tell yourself?
Oh my God, just chill the hell out. Like stop driving yourself so crazy. Stop like Googling everything. I had really bad postpartum anxiety with my first, and I didn't even know that was a thing. So yeah, I just really struggled with the rigidity around his sleep. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that like it's okay if he sleeps with me or on me and I'm not going to ruin him and I don't need to do these crazy schedules. Like at one point I tried the 12 hours by 12 weeks book and I was like stretching his feeds for 4 hours during the day and like it just was so miserable and like didn't even I don't know. I tried it all and I wish I could go back and tell myself that like none of it really is going to matter in the long run and that I will regret all of those things that I did, but I would never have regretted holding him or supporting him. So I just wish that I wasn't so afraid to do that.
Yeah, it's funny you speak of like rigid plans. I feel like I was the opposite. Like I just was like, he's gonna sleep when he sleeps.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't know, but like almost too much, right? So,
Right. I mean, yeah, either extreme can be tough for
like,
sure.
I think I missed cues because of
Right.
that. And I sometimes had a grumpy or wired baby because I wasn't like,
Because you assumed he would just sleep if he was tired.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like we got up at roughly the same time every day because he got up with us. And so like there are some things that were just innately fine because that's just was our rhythms anyway. But it for me, I remember stumbling on an article about wake windows, and we can, wake windows are their whole pile of problematic and or
Yeah.
helpful depending on who's using them and how. But that was literally the first time I really processed. I was like, oh yeah, I guess you guys kind of have a pattern. Oh yeah, I guess you could use this in a helpful way, not in a really rigid
Right.
way, but like in a, I don't know, setting up your day a little bit with a better rhythm.
Right.
And for me, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of helpful. And I just was like, I wasn't really thinking about it in that way. In like, I don't know, any sort of like sleep pressure build up certain time. It just wasn't processing that way for me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I feel like I was almost too much like, whatever is going to happen, is going to happen. And then, as I started to learn more about sleep science, I was like, oh,
Yeah. A lot
I
makes more
see.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And, that different perspective. For me,
Right.
it's like I needed more information. And it's funny to me that I didn't try to have more information earlier because that's just how I normally process things. And so, like, I would look back and tell myself to learn more, um,
Yeah.
to learn more about the biology, not, about um, the sleep science
Right.
and what does actually support healthy sleep. And, I think my oldest is going to be 11 in March, and there were not a lot of good resources
No,
then.
I can imagine. I mean, even just 6 years ago with my first, there was like some blogs and stuff, but not a ton.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there really weren't. And so there wasn't as much. There wasn't as much to actually dig into. But there was James McKenna. Baby Sleep Info Source was a thing, even back when my oldest was, I think it was there when he was a baby, if not when he was a really young toddler. Evolutionary parenting was a thing. I mean, there was some stuff out there, but there wasn't, not like now. And so I don't know. I feel like I needed that science, and it made such a difference for me to really understand what was going on. And then I was just so blindsided by sleep training. It just really was just like, you're doing what? What?
I
Um,
know.
and I don't know that there's something I could have done differently with that because it just wasn't on my radar. And it still is so much pressure. I mean, I think the pressure is worse now with social media than
Yeah.
when my oldest was little. I just had to deal with it with moms I was chatting with,
Right.
and I was just like, okay, we don't need to talk about that. Um, but now I just feel like it bombards you from so many more channels that it is actually harder than when he was little to just, I don't know. But on the flip side, there's more responsive folks out there. And so there's a lot more information to find that is of good quality.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. There seems to be like, this wave now of more responsive and like attachment-based stuff, which is great. But then you're also getting a lot more of the sleep training stuff too. So it's like a mixed bag. And I think it's just all about like curating your feed and your, make sure that you're just following people that are aligned with you, muting accounts that show up that you can't stand or blocking or whatever you need to do. Yeah, because even for me, like I'll have stuff come across my page sometimes and I'm like, wait, what? And like if I'm having doubts about, a certain sleep strategy or something, like I can only imagine what an average parent without all this like sleep training and knowledge and stuff has to worry about and to think about. So yeah, I mean, social media definitely is nice because it can connect you. Like I feel like on my page, we have such a nice sense of community and people feel really like supported and validated. And I think that is so wonderful. But then there's also more of the dark side. So yeah, it's, I guess, what you make it, right? Your experience can be really great or really crappy, depending
Yeah.
on what stuff you're consuming.
Yeah. I'm right there with you on the being mindful of who you're following and who you're looking at. Like once you know
Mm-hmm.
what resonates and what doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to look at both sides, right?
Right.
Unfollow.
Right. No, exactly.
And build that bank of accounts that are all going to be saying a lot of the same things, but we all say it in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
And you need to hear it in slightly different ways. So like your page is one of the pages when I'm giving clients of mine, folks to follow, I give you yours because you put out a lot more content than I do. And you do
Thank you.
Instagram way better than me. I hate Instagram. Like, to be really honest, I hate it. I don't like doing it. I don't like doing my Instagram content. It doesn't play to my strengths. And so I have,
everybody's different.
Yeah. And I love that others are really good at it because I think it's great to have that content. And so I have like this short list of professionals that I'll give out, usually a little bit individualized depending on the mom. Mm-hmm. And, like, start here, like start filling your feed with these folks.
Right.
Because I trust all their content and I know it's going to be encouraging and validating and evidence-based and responsive. Mm-hmm. And then we can start to fill your feed with all the stuff that's going to be really encouraging instead of, the stuff that makes you feel like you're doing a bad job.
Totally.
Yeah. Awesome. I love talking about our experiences with you. Sort of as we wrap up, is there anything, thinking about just reflecting on your own experiences as a mom and gaining that knowledge as a professional? Anything that you feel hasn't come out in our conversation?
No, I think, I think for anyone listening, just know that like you can trust yourself. And if something feels wrong or feels unaligned, then it probably is. And it's okay to listen to that voice inside instead of, even if it's somebody that you trust, like your parents or your pediatrician, or, if they're giving you advice that doesn't feel like it's going to work for you, then it's okay to just let it go in one ear and out the other. And, you know your baby and your situation best. So just listen to yourself and know that like everything truly is a phase and it will pass. So even if you're not totally in love with this phase that you're in right now, like it will pass. Nothing is forever. So
yes, I could have said the exact same thing. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Rachael, I'm going to put your info in the show notes, but tell folks where they can find your awesome content.
Yeah. So I'm on mostly Instagram, Hey Sleepy Baby. And then I have a website and a blog with lots of freebie information and some other like paid workshops and courses. And we do one-on-one consultations, like I mentioned. And then I'm on TikTok at Rachael Shepardota, which is just like a little bit more fun and more personal than my educational content on Instagram. And yeah, that's it. And then my podcast is called No One Told Us, and it's mostly interviews, but I do some solo episodes and some episodes with my husband too. And we just kind of talk about basically kind of like this conversation, like all the things that you wish you knew before having kids through the lenses of different professionals and different people in the parenting space. So it's really fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I always love talking with you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.